For my teaching placement, I worked at Eastern High School in Lansing, Michigan. While there, I worked with a math teacher named Mrs. M during her teacher collaboration hour and her fifth hour mathematical studies class. The literacy learners I worked with were two seniors named Emma and Susie. Their class was extremely small, only 15 students, because it was part of the International Baccalaureate program. That being said, we usually worked in the back of the classroom or in the hallway. I first interviewed Emma on her life and outside of school literacy. I found out she loves to read inside and outside of school. She particularly likes books and plays and will read whenever she has time, whether it be at home or in the library. She usually goes to the store or thrifting to find new books to read. She explained how the IB program is extremely time-consuming and therefore her time to read has drastically decreased. She explained how she used to read for about 4 to 6 hours a day, but now only has time for about 2 to 3 hours. Emma also likes to read outside of school, particularly stories and poetry. She also explained how the IB program has cut into her writing time. The students are also already required to write internal assessments and historical investigations. As a result, she only writes a few hours a week. Also, she typically does not share her writing with anyone, but sometimes posts her poetry online. When trying to read and write, she usually works it around her busy schedule as she is involved in school plays, color guard, and swim. An important person in her life is her dad because she looks up to him. She explained that her dad is dyslexic and influences her to try and excel at reading and writing. Her mom is also important to her, and her love of reading has influenced Emma to read new books. On general in-school literacy practices, Emma explained that to overcome her struggles with reading, she likes to reread, find key terms, and take a break. Since the IB program is so small, all the students are close, and Emma typically asks them for help. Only when no consensus can be made does Emma ask the teacher for assistance. She finds biology text to be the most difficult to read because, as she explains it tends to be a dry read and it's harder to focus. Emma most enjoys history and English books because they contain a story with a plot to follow. When it comes to writing, Emma explained that her biggest downfall is in math, because it's difficult learning the vocabulary and structure. When she struggles with writing, she typically tries to find the correct structure of math sentences. In terms of disciplinary literacy practices, Emma believes she's a good reader in class because she's having no problems with understanding the current material. She believes in order to be a better reader, she could practice on word problems to learn their structure and wording. In class, Emma reads her packet, which contains notes and questions. Emma explained that reading is done with formulas and word problems. When asked about writing, she explained that not much explanation and proofs writing is done, but instead mathematical equations. I also interviewed Susie on her outside of school literacy and life. Susie enjoys reading, music, and winter guard. She loves to read outside of school, in her room, library, and on the phone. She typically gets her reading material from the school and bookstores. Susie usually reads 1 to 2 hours a day and 6 to 8 hours on the weekends. Unlike Emma, Susie does not write very often outside of school. She only writes for school, whether it be homework or papers. This means she only writes about 1 hour a night. When it comes to school papers, Susie usually shares her work with other students for proofreading. With her busy schedule, Susie does not have a specific time or place to read or write. It's usually just in her free time. An important person in her life is her mom, because she's proud of all she has accomplished raising her and her brother. She works long hours as a manager and uses reading and writing when going through employee and store materials. On general in-school literacy practices, Susie struggles with reading textbooks, and in order to fully understand, she looks for context clues and rereads. She typically asks for friends and teacher help when struggling. Like Emma, she also dislikes science textbooks because of their unfamiliar terms. Susie also has a love for English books because they follow different lives and stories. In terms of writing struggles, she has difficulties with academic writing, like switching between common everyday writing to an academic tone. Strategies she uses to improve her writing include using a thesaurus and rereading multiple times. I also interviewed Susie on her disciplinary literacy practices. In mathematical studies, she believes she is a good reader because she looks for specific information that can help her solve the problems. She believes that she can be a better reader by knowing more of the terms. In class, she typically reads note packets and review tests. A lot of reading is done in terms of mathematical reading and story problems. Most of the writing is calculations. Susie explained that class is spent on writing and answering questions. My literacy learners already have a lot of literacy experience in terms of reading and writing in school. They also have their own literacy strategies like taking a break, rereading, looking for context clues, and going over vocabulary. Emma and Susie both read and write for their IB class and outside of class. Both of my literacy learners' home contexts influence their literacy. For instance, Susie's mom works long hours, so she reads when she's alone. Also, her younger brother needs help on homework, so she usually assists him. Both of these aspects increase her need to read and improve her critical skills. Emma's home life also influences her literacy. For example, her father's dyslexia increases her need to improve and do well. I witnessed many ideas and principles about literacy from TE 302 when working with my focal students. For instance, the class uses I can statements, a word wall, math symbols, exit slips, and book checks. They are also given Khan Academy videos online to prove their learning. This happens to be an example of a new literacy being used in the classroom. We worked on vocabulary in the classroom during week 5 of our class discussions, and sometimes Miss M would reference the word wall in the back of the classroom. This would come in handy to many students who would go look at it during class. We also discussed talk in the classroom during week 7, and the class used this particular strategy every day. For example, Mrs. M would usually introduce the new section, and then the students would work together on their homework. They also used the cube strategy. The C stands for circle the key numbers, the U stands for underline the question, the B stands for box any action words, the E stands for evaluate what steps to take, and the S stands for solve and check to see if the answer makes sense. While at my placement, I also witnessed firsthand different ways to have the students be responsible for their work. For instance, book checks and exit slips made sure the students would pay attention and learn the information. During my class visits, I worked with them on Chapter 10, which was probability and statistics, Chapter 6, which was on advanced geometry, and Chapter 7, which was on arithmetic and geometric sequences and series. I typically helped them on their homework and completing their note packets. I also interviewed them on their literacy strategies and their reading and writing habits. I believe my literacy learners learned more strategies from me, like the 5 C's, the SQ3R model. The first time I showed them the 5 C's model, they were hesitant to use it on their homework. However, when I used it the second time, during some of their probability difficulties, the strategies was of great help to them. This is because labeling the parts of the question allowed them to see what the problem was actually asking. I also used the SQ3R model with my focal students when they were having problems with geometry. They also thought the model was useful in labeling the different parts of the problem. They do higher math in IB class, so they would get lost on many of the longer word problems. As a result, I also explained some important vocabulary words and what to look for in certain problems. I learned from my literacy learners that the IB program is very stressful and that their workload is very heavy. This made me realize that teachers with heavy course loads should work together to come up with a suitable homework schedule. My focal students also taught me the cube strategy that I mentioned earlier. I would like to continue with my literacy learners, but I feel like younger students in algebra and geometry would get more use out of my new strategies. If I was the MT, I would explain the lesson and then write important vocabulary and definitions on the board. I would do this because my students typically have troubles with understanding the math vocab in their homework.